In this video, we're learning how to build wooden router trays using a few basic jigs and a plunge router. Today we're building two different styles. The first one can hold a phone as well as have a few items up front. And the second one has two spaces for items. And this one's actually made out of walnut. I would strongly recommend starting these trays on some scrap or some cheaper wood. That way you can make your adjustments and possibly make your mistakes on the scrap wood before you're investing in the more expensive woods. The first tray we're going to start with is this one. It's made using a template bought from Rockler. These templates are sold as circle and grommet templates, but they can be used for almost anything. Buying templates is a great option for those of you that don't have a lot of tools yet, because making your own templates can be time consuming and they do require to have a few different tools, which you may or may not have. I also want you to know that these types of templates, ones made out of acrylic, are everywhere. So if you just search up router templates online, you will find places around you that sell them. And you can mix and match templates to come up with your own unique valet tray design. I'm starting with a piece of material that's about 11 inches by 11 inches. As you can see, we're using two openings that are right next to each other. I'm keeping mine about 1.25 inches up from the bottom here, which means that if you want to, you can get two trays out of this one piece of wood. In addition, if you're only making one, the extra material can be used for clamping the work down and for the router base to have more surface area to slide on. And don't worry, once we finish all of the routing, we're going to go ahead and trim off all the excess material around the tray. The first bit we are using is a Whiteside 3000 template bit. This bit has a 1/4 inch cutting depth and a top bearing. How this is going to work is that the top bearing will ride along the template, cutting the exact shape of the template below in the wood. Before we move on, there are two common mistakes that can happen while using a template like this set up in this way. So let's look at those now before we begin routing. First, be sure that the initial plunge cut is deep enough so that the bearing is in line with the template. You can see that if I don't get the depth right, the cutters will cut right through the template, and that's not good. Again, the first pass should be deep enough so that the bearing is in alignment with the edge of the template, like this. Second, with a router bit like this one that only cuts a 1/4 inch depth, you can easily set the bit to be too deep, plunging below the cutter line, and then when you try to move towards the edge of a template, nothing happens. That's because you're now trying to push the bearing through the wood, while the cutter is actually below the surface. In a less extreme case, you can have the cutter just slightly under the surface of the wood, and you'll know this is happening because you'll start to see these little fuzzy wood fibers appear. Bottom line, make sure that you double check your first plunge cut's depth and verify that the guide bearing will indeed be following the router template. If you like my style of teaching and you're looking to learn even more about routers, then my new beginners online routers course is now available. This course provides over 3 hours of video lessons, downloadable documents, buying guides, full access to me, and much more. If you're interested, follow the links below to start learning and mastering skills that you'll be able to use the rest of your creative life. To attach the template, use 2 or 3 pieces of double-sided tape and firmly press the template to the work. To set the correct depth, I find it helpful to slide the router off to one edge of the template and lower the bit until the bearing is in line with the template edge and that the cutting head is not below the surface of the wood. From there, drop the depth rod down and lock it in place. That way, you know that when the depth rod bottoms out in the turret, you are at the right depth. Be sure that you have the turret somewhere in the middle That way you can adjust the turret down each step to make incremental, deeper adjustments. Starting with the circle, first I like to plunge down about 1/4 to 3/8 away from the edge of the template, then work my way back to the template's edge. In this case, that's towards myself. Once the bearing contacts the edge of the template, start to follow the circle around. In this case, I'm choosing to go clockwise around the circle. Again, the direction doesn't seem to make a huge difference, so do what seems best for you. Once you've worked all the way around, it's time to start cleaning out the middle. I like to work from the bottom to the top and from the left to the right, but honestly, you should be free to move as you please. However, be aware, you will feel when the router is making a climb cut, as the router will move a little faster. But you should have no problem with control here, especially with this small bit. Once you feel like you've got it all, release the plunge lever and bring the bit back out of the hole. At this point, inspect your work. And if you have to clean up something you missed, go ahead and do that now. Jump over to the next opening using the exact same technique as before with the circle. Take your time. There is no need to rush here. Once that opening is cleared, it's time to drop the turret down 1 click and begin removing more material. With that done, it's back to the circle to catch it up to the depth you just finished the other one at. And that's how it goes, back and forth until you have achieved your desired depth on both openings. And don't worry, sometimes you do get a little tear out at the bottom, so you may need to do a quick cleanup pass to clean that up. As a word of caution, be aware of your material's thickness, because you don't want to blow through the bottom side or make the bottom part of the tray too thin. My depth, for example, is about 9/16, which leaves 3/16 of material at the bottom of the tray. To remove the template, use a thin putty knife or something similar to get in between the template and the wood. With that removed, the next thing to do is actually cut the slot for the phone. To make this slot, I'm using a 1/2 inch spiral upcut bit with an edge guide on the router. Layout here is key, so locate the exact spot for the slot, make stop and start lines, and plunge the router down, route over, and lift it cleanly out. Doing this in 2 passes is recommended, especially for hardwoods. The final depth of the phone slot is going to be about the same as the other 2 openings. Once that's done, it's time to figure out how big you want the tray to be. Things like how close to the openings do you want the edge of the tray to be, and do you want rounded corners or square corners? I'm using a table saw to trim these to size, but you can use any other saw that you may have. I like the way this one turned out, so I'll duplicate this exact build on a nice piece of hardwood. From there, sanding begins. And the use of these small bowl sanding pads that fit onto the end of your drill work really well for sanding these out. Just make sure that you work through the sanding progressions like normal, even when you hand sand. After that, you can choose a finish. I'm staying with the Odie's oil. I really like this product, so I'll sand up to 180 grit and be done. And there's one complete valet tray. Moving on to the next tray, which I think is a little more elegant than the first one because of the rounded corners and the really small reveals around the edges. This one too, I recommend starting with practice material before you commit to the more expensive woods. And this time, instead of buying a template, I'm actually going to quickly demonstrate how to make your own template. And so you can just imagine, once you're able to make your own templates, the sky is the limit when it comes to design. For this template, I'm starting with a piece of 3/4 inch MDF, which stands for medium density fiberboard, and it measures 17 inches long by 6 inches wide. The idea here is to measure out 2 rectangles which are roughly in the center of the board. The large one is 3.5 inches by 5 inches, and the smaller one is 3.5 inches by 2.5 inches. And they are separated by a 1/2 inch flat space or reveal. The corners are rounded at a 5/8 radius, which I used a mechanics socket that was the same size to make the layout. There's probably a better way to do that, but sometimes you have to work with whatever you have around. With that done, it's over to the drill press with a 5/8 inch Forstner bit to cut those radiuses out. Be sure to leave the pencil line when you're cutting these holes. I'm using a drill press simply because it's the best tool for the job, but you could use a drill guide like this one or a hand drill. From there, a jigsaw works great for cutting everything out. Again, just make sure you are leaving your pencil line as you cut, because the next step will get you to that line. And to do that, a spindle sander works perfectly. It sands all the remaining material quickly, and most importantly, it keeps the edge at an exact 90-degree angle to the face. For me, I like to finish the template off with a little bit of Odie's to protect it and seal it from moisture. I've also pre-drilled 2 screw locations so that the template can be mechanically attached to the work. And you can certainly use double-side tape, but if you want a more secure connection, screws is the way to go. With the template attached, I'm installing a similar bit as before. However, this one has a 1/2 inch cutting length. Why? Because we need the extra length because the template is now thicker. So in order to be able to reach our same depth as before, we need more cutting length. However, you can most definitely use the same 1/4 inch bit as before. The only thing you'll need to do is once that bit runs out of cutting depth, you'll simply need to remove the template and use the new opening itself as the template. Just know that whatever bit you decide to use, double check your cutting depth by sliding the template and router off to one side, then lower the router all the way to see how deep of a cut you'll be able to make with that bit. This would also be a good time to double check and set up your depth for your first pass, making sure that the guide bearing will be fully in contact with the template. Once the template is secure, start routing just as before. The only difference this time is you'll have more material to remove. Keep stepping down with each pass, moving from one opening to another until both are at the same depth. Remove the template, and this time I'll trim off the excess material and leave an 1/8 inch flat spot or reveal all the way around. In addition, I'll use my spindle sander to round the edges to that same 5/8 radius. This could also be done using a random orbital sander. Just make sure that you're staying at a 90-degree angle to both surfaces of the tray. And you can check this while you're sanding with a square. From there, sanding and finishing, and this tray is now done. Well, today's video is actually a small segment of my full 3-hour online routers course. So if you find yourself a little bit overwhelmed by today's project and you feel like you need to learn more, then my routers course might be ideal for you. All you got to do to figure out if this course is a good fit is to click the link down in the notes section and in the pinned comment, and that'll take you over to my website. For those of you that decided to make it to the end of the video, I'm offering you a 50% discount. All you have to do is email me and let me know you made it to the end of this video, and I'll send you a discount code so you can get 50% off that course to get you started. Of course, if you ever have any questions about woodworking and carpentry, please hit me up. And if I can pray for you in any way, shape, or form, please let me know that as well. Bye for now.